Today I'm sewing and sharing a classic pair of everyday pants. This is Simplicity 9647. These pants have a fly front zipper and welt pockets in the back. I've chosen a medium weight twill for this project. This is actually a remnant of the same fabric that I used for a previous bomber jacket sewing tutorial. You can find this pattern at your local fabric store and online. I've left a link for you below so you can check out all the details, grab a copy, and sew along with me. So grab that pattern, mark your dots and your notches, and let's get started. On your front pant pattern piece, you have dashes indicating our fly stitching line and a large dot indicating where we want to reinforce the bottom of the fly. Grab your right front pant piece, the front piece that will be on your right side when you wear the garment. We're going to transfer those markings onto the right side of the fabric. Now we want to take this right front pant piece to the sewing machine and reinforce the bottom of the fly an inch above and below the large dot that we've transferred. So with a 5/8 inch seam allowance starting an inch above that dot, I'm going to sew through that large dot, stopping an inch below the dot. Now place your pocket facing right sides together with your pocket edge on your right front piece and pin in place along that slanted edge. Do the same for your left front pant piece. Then we're going to sew along this slanted line from the top of the pant to the small dots that you transferred from your pattern piece, backstitching at the small dots to secure, using a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Now that those facings are sewn to the pant, we're going to trim those seams by about half. And then we're going to understitch. We're going to turn this facing away from the pant so that it lays on top of its seam allowance, and then sew the facing to the seam allowance about 1/8 of an inch away from the original stitching line, doing this for both facings. Then we can turn our facings to the inside of the pant and give those pocket seams a good press. Now that those pocket facings are turned to the inside, grab your front yoke and pocket pieces and place them right sides together with their corresponding facing pieces. And then pin those double-notched curved edges. Now we're going to sew these pocket pieces together around this curve from the top of the pocket to the side seam of the pocket with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And then finish those curved pocket edges in your preferred method. I'm going to be using my serger. Now we're going to place these front pieces right sides together. We're going to sew these front pieces together from the dot that we reinforced earlier to the notch just below it, backstitching at the dot to secure, sewing from point to point with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Clip to that large dot, being careful not to clip through your stitching. Then we can open out these pant pieces. Line up the top and side edges of your pocket and pin in place. And then baste those top and side edges of the pocket in place through the front pants. Apply interfacing to the wrong side of your fly piece. To finish the outer curved edge, I'm going to press that material to the wrong side all along the curved edge by 1/4 of an inch. Now that that's pressed, I'm going to sew all along this raw edge all along the curve. Now we're going to place our fly right sides together with the right front pant piece, pinning from the top to the dot. Now we're going to sew the fly to the pant with a 5/8 inch seam allowance starting at the top of the fly to the large dot, backstitching to secure. And then trim that seam to 1/4 of an inch. Open out that fly along its seam and place your zipper right sides together with the fly piece. You want the top stop of your zipper to be 7/8 of an inch below the top of the fly, and you want the right side of the zipper tape to overlap the fly seam by 1/4 of an inch. Once we have that aligned, we're going to stitch along the side of the zipper that's closest to the outer edge of the fly, from the top stop of the zipper to the bottom of the fly. Now that that's sewn, turn the fly to the inside along its seam, giving that fly seam a good press. And then from the wrong side of the garment, you can pin the outer edge of the fly to the right front pant to hold it in place. Alternatively, you could use wash-away tape to hold that fly in place. Now for the left center front edge of your pant, you're going to take it to the ironing board and press it to the wrong side by 3/8 of an inch from the dot to the top of the pant. Now that that left front edge is pressed to the wrong side by 3/8 of an inch, we can work from the right side again, opening up our zipper and placing that folded edge of the left pant on top of the left zipper tape so that the fold is lying right next to those zipper teeth. Again, making sure that the zipper stop is 7/8 of an inch away from the top edge of the pant. And pin in place. Take it to your sewing machine and baste the zipper in place. Fold your underlap piece wrong sides together lengthwise and give that a press. And then using your serger or a zigzag stitch, finish the long edges and the bottom curved edges. Now I'm going to take this piece to the sewing machine and baste the top, side, and bottom edge with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, just so that I have my seam lines marked. Now place your underlap underneath the left side of your pant and allowing the left zipper teeth to sit right on top of the basting stitches that we placed alongside that serged edge of the underlap, so that those zipper teeth are placed right along that underlap seam line. And pin in place. Take it to your sewing machine and using your zipper foot sew close to that folded edge of the left center front from the top of the fabric to the large dot, backstitching to secure. Now we're going to take the right side of the pant to the sewing machine and sew along the lines that we drew onto the right front pant at the beginning, sewing straight from the top of the pant and then curving toward that center seam. You'll want to move your underlap out of the way and make sure that you don't catch that underlap as you're stitching on the right side. Go ahead and top stitch along your marked lines, backstitching at the end to secure. And now on the inside of the pant, we can hand tack the bottom of the underlap and the fly together along their bottom edges, just using a needle and thread. And then if your zipper is extending far beyond your underlap, trim the bottom of the zipper so that it's in line with the bottom of the underlap. And if you'd like a nice clean finish for the bottom of your zipper, you can encase the bottom edge between a piece of bias tape. And then stitch that bias tape around the bottom edge of that zipper. Now the bottom edge of that zipper also has a nice clean finish. The last thing that we want to do for the zipper is working from the right side, sew a bar tack at the end of your curved top stitching at the center seam to reinforce the bottom of the zipper through all thicknesses. Because I'm working with a metal zipper here, I'm going to skip this step to prevent breaking my needle, and I'm going to allow the back stitching that I did earlier to suffice. I've transferred the darts onto the tops of my back pieces and now I'm ready to pin them in place. Fold the dart in half and pin through one dart leg and out the other. Do this for both darts. Then take them to your sewing machine and sew from the top to the point, leaving thread tails at the point so that you can tie them in knots. And then press your darts toward the center back. Apply interfacing to the wrong sides of your welt pieces, and then fold these pieces in half lengthwise, wrong sides together. Then we can take it to the sewing machine and baste along the short and long edges with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. I'm also going to finish all of the raw edges using my serger. Now we're going to take our back pant pieces to the sewing machine and stitch around our welt rectangle, right along the outer lines of the rectangle. Do this for both pant pieces. Then, following the line along the middle of the rectangle that we transferred from the pattern piece, we're going to slash through the welts. And then we're going to clip from those slash lines into each of the corners of the rectangle, being careful not to clip through your stitching. And then, working from the outside of the pant, I'm going to place my welt piece on the right side of the pant, matching the basting line in the center of my welt with the lower stitching line of the rectangle that we just created, matching the lower dots and those stitching lines, and pin in place. Then we're going to sew from one transfer dot to the other, right along the basting line, doing this for both back pant pieces. To prepare my back pocket pieces, I'm going to take them both to the serger and serge around all of the raw edges for both pieces. Now along the top edge of the pocket with the single dots, I'm going to connect the dots using a ruler. These dots should be at the seam line 5/8 of an inch below the top edge, and I'm marking the wrong side of the fabric. Now I can use these lines as my stitching guide. Now place that pocket piece right sides together with your welt on the outside of the pant, placing the line that you drew right on top of the line that we stitched earlier, and pin in place. Now we can take these pieces to the sewing machine and sew from dot to dot, backstitching at both dots to secure. Now working from the inside of the pant, I'm going to fold the top of the pant so that it's right sides together with itself, and so that now I have access to that material at the top of the pocket opening. At the bottom of the pocket on the wrong side of the material, I've transferred a line 5/8 of an inch away from the edge from dot to dot, just as I did along the opposite short edge. I'm going to place that line that I've transferred right along the remaining stitching line from the rectangle that we sewed earlier on the outside of the pant. Lining up those lines and the dots, I'm going to pin it in place. I've done this for both pants. Now I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and sew along the line that I've transferred from dot to dot for both pocket pieces, backstitching at both ends to secure. Now the last part of the welt that we have to sew are these little triangular edges that are remaining on either end of the welt opening. We're going to work from the inside of the pant. We're going to sew these upper edges of the pocket and the welt to that tiny triangular piece from the top of the triangle to the bottom, backstitching to secure, doing that on both sides and for both pocket sets. Now that I have those main points secured, securing the pocket to those tiny triangles, I'm going to continue my stitching line straight down the sides of the pocket to enclose the pocket with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, from the bottom of my triangle stitchings to the bottom of the pockets. Now place your front and back pant pieces right sides together along the inner leg seams, and pin your front and back pieces together along those inner seams. Sew both of your inseams with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and finish in your preferred method. Now that those inner leg seams are sewn, we can sew our center seam. Place your back pieces right sides together, matching your notches and the center seam. Now we can sew from the front at the bottom of the zipper all the way across that center seam and along that back seam with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and then finish in your preferred method. With the front and back pieces still right sides together, pin your side seams on both sides. Then sew both of your side seams with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and finish your seams. Take your carrier piece to the ironing board and press it in half lengthwise, wrong sides together. Once you've created that crease, we're going to take it back to the ironing board and press both of the long edges to meet the crease, creating folds on opposite sides. Now that those long edges are folded and tucked to the inside, we can fold it in half once more. Then we're going to take it to the sewing machine and sew close to both long edges from top to bottom. Now we'll cut our carrier into 4 equal pieces, each 3.5 inches long. I've transferred the dots from my pattern piece, indicating where I'm going to place my carriers just using pins. I'm going to align one short edge of each carrier with the pins and pin in place, aligning the raw edges. Then I'm going to take the carriers to the sewing machine and baste them in place with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Apply interfacing to the wrong sides of one set of waistband pieces for your back waistband and your right and left waistband pieces. Then place them right sides together, matching the notches, and pin in place. Also prepare your uninterfaced waistband pieces, placing them right sides together and pinning the side seams. Sew the side seams for both sets with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and press your seams open. Now we're going to place our interfaced waistband right sides together with the top of the pants, matching our center backs, our seams, and our notches, and pinning in place. Note that the short edges of the waistband will extend 5/8 of an inch beyond your front fly and your underlap on both sides. Now that that's pinned all the way around, take it to your sewing machine and sew it in place with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Once that's sewn, we want to trim the seam by about half. Then open out that waistband away from the pant and press that seam allowance up toward the waistband all the way around. Take your remaining uninterfaced waistband piece to the ironing board, fold up and press the lower edge to the wrong side by 5/8 of an inch all the way across. Once you have the bottom edge pressed to the wrong side by 5/8 of an inch, you can trim it down to 3/8 of an inch. Now place your waistband pieces right sides together, matching your center fronts, center backs, and your side seams, and pin in place all the way around. We're going to sew all along the top edges, as well as each of our short edges at the center front. Now that our waistbands are stitched together, we can trim these corners, and then also trim the seam allowance by about half. Then we're going to understitch. We're going to open out this facing so that it lays on top of its seam allowance. Then we're going to sew this waistband facing to its seam allowance all the way around with about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. As you work around these corners, your presser foot won't allow you to understitch all the way to the corners, so just stitch as far as you can. Now that that's understitched, turn this waistband facing to the inside of the garment, poking out those corners, and give that top seam a good press. Now we want to take that folded edge of the facing that we pressed to the wrong side earlier and place the folded edge over the stitching line so that it just covers those stitches. And pin in place all the way around. Alternatively, you could use double-sided wash-away tape to hold everything in place instead of pinning. Now that that inner waistband is secured in place, we can take it to the sewing machine and either stitching in the ditch of the original waistband seam or just above with about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're going to sew all the way across from center front to center front. Sewing from the front of the garment, periodically checking underneath to make sure that you are catching that folded edge of the waistband as you go. Now we're going to take the loose ends of the carriers and fold them to the wrong side by about 1/2 inch. And then fold the entire carrier upward toward the top of the pant and pin in place. Do this for all 4 carriers. Then we're going to take it to the sewing machine and edge stitch each carrier in place along the top edge. Now we're ready to sew our buttonhole into our right front waistband according to the placement marking from your pattern piece. And then sew your button to the left waistband, again according to the button placement marking from your pattern piece. The last thing we need to do is hem the bottom of the pants. You can try on your pants at this point to determine how wide of a hem you'd like. I'm just going to turn it up the recommended hem allowance, turning up the bottom of each pant leg to the wrong side by 1 1/4 inches and giving that a good press. I've pressed up the bottom edges of both pants to the wrong side by 1 1/4 inches. Additionally, I've also pressed the raw edge to the wrong side by 1/4 inch so that I could fold that raw edge under to conceal it. Once you have your hem folded up and the raw edge tucked underneath, pin it in place all the way around. I'm just going to take it to my sewing machine and sew along this inner folded edge all the way around both of the hems. And now your pants are complete. Thank you for watching this sew along. Make sure you check out my other videos for more great sewing inspiration, and I'll see you in the next video.